He didn't even hesitate. This was Mallory's oversight, my supervisor said, palms flat on the conference table, voice steady as stone. 20 heads turned toward me. The air felt sucked out of my lungs. I stared at him, waiting for the joke. Never came. His eyes stayed fixed on the presentation screen, avoiding mine completely. The fluorescent lights hummed above us, making everything feel surreal and too bright. My pen rolled off the table. Nobody moved to pick it up. The silence stretched like pulled taffy, sticky and uncomfortable. I could feel heat crawling up my neck as people shifted in their seats. Some looked sympathetic. Others just looked uncomfortable. My supervisor, Derek Lawson, continued his explanation like I wasn't even there. Like my 6 years at Portland Analytics meant nothing. Like trust was just another word people threw around in meetings without meaning it. My hands started trembling, so I pressed them flat against my thighs under the table. I wasn't going to cry here. Not in front of everyone. Not when I knew something they didn't know yet. I felt my mouth curve into a polite smile while my stomach twisted violently. My nails dug into my notebook. He wouldn't look at me. He was already done with me, already safe. Or so he thought. The meeting continued around me like water flowing past a rock. People asked questions about the quarterly report, about numbers I'd triple-checked myself. Derek answered smoothly, professionally like he always did. He had that talent for sounding confident even when he was lying through his teeth. I'd watched him do it dozens of times with clients, with upper management, with anyone who questioned his decisions. But I never thought he'd turn that weapon on me. My coworker, Tasha, sitting 2 seats down, caught my eye and mouthed something I couldn't quite read. Maybe you okay? I wasn't. But I nodded anyway, keeping that fake smile plastered on my face like a mask. Inside, my brain was already 3 steps ahead, calculating, planning, remembering. Because I had something Derek didn't know about. Something he'd completely forgotten in his rush to save himself. As the meeting moved on without me, one thought screamed louder than my heartbeat. They haven't heard the recording. Not yet. My company had a policy about documenting important decisions. Every major meeting got recorded and saved to our shared drive. It was supposed to protect everyone, create accountability, prevent exactly this kind of situation. But people forgot about it all the time. The little red light on the camera was so easy to ignore after years of automatic recordings. Derek had forgotten. I could see it in how relaxed he was now, leaning back in his chair, already moving on to the next agenda item like this was just another Tuesday morning problem solved. He'd thrown me under the bus so easily, so smoothly, that I almost admired the performance. Almost. But that recording existed somewhere in our system. Every word he'd said 3 weeks ago when he approved my work. Every reassurance. Every promise that he'd take responsibility if anything went wrong. I just had to find it. And once I did, everything would change. My name is Mallory Quinn, and up until that morning I was the reliable one. Fixer. The woman who stayed late and followed instructions exactly, especially his. For 6 years, I'd been the person Derek could count on. Need someone to work through lunch. Call Mallory. Weekend emergency with a client presentation. Mallory will handle it. Someone has to stay until midnight to finish the budget analysis. Don't worry, Mallory never complains. I'd built my reputation on being dependable. My performance reviews always said the same things. Detail-oriented, dedicated, team player. I thought those qualities mattered. I thought they protected me. My desk was the neat one with color-coded folders and backup files for everything. Other people joked that I was too organized, too careful. But Derek always praised it. This is why you're invaluable, he'd say, tapping my perfectly formatted reports. I believed him. I believed that hard work and loyalty were enough. That if I just kept my head down and did excellent work, I'd be safe. Protected. Valued. That morning, staring at the 20 faces avoiding my gaze, I realized how stupid I'd been. 3 weeks earlier, he'd leaned into my cubicle wall and said, "Go with version B. I'll take responsibility." I remember nodding. I remember trusting him. It was late on a Friday afternoon, and most people had already left for the weekend. The office had that quiet, empty feeling that made every sound echo. Derek had appeared at my desk looking tired, running his hand through his hair the way he always did when stressed. "Which version do you think is stronger?" he'd asked, pointing at my screen. I'd spent the whole week developing 2 different approaches to our quarterly forecast. Version A was conservative, safe, using our standard methodology. Version B was more aggressive, showing higher projections based on recent market trends. It was riskier but potentially more impressive to the executive team. "Version A is safer," I'd told him honestly. "But version B shows more growth potential if the market holds steady." Derek studied both options for maybe 30 seconds. "Let's go bold," he said. "Version B. If anyone questions it, I'll handle it. This is my call, not yours." Those words. "I'll handle it. My call, not yours." I should have gotten it in writing. He approved the document. Signed off. Mile. And the meeting where he did it. Automatically recorded, company policy. He forgot that part. The approval meeting had been quick, maybe 15 minutes. Just Derek, myself, and our project coordinator, Luis. We'd gone through the forecast line by line. Derek had asked a few questions, nodding as I explained my reasoning. "The market indicators support these numbers," I'd said, pulling up the data sources. "But there's always risk with projections this aggressive." Derek had waved his hand dismissively. "The executive team wants to see confidence. They want growth. This shows both." He'd pulled up the signature screen on his tablet, added his electronic approval, and sent it through to the senior management team. "Good work, Mallory," he'd said. "This is exactly what they need to see." Luis had made some joke about happy hour and we'd wrapped up. The whole thing felt routine, normal, like 100 other approval meetings I'd been part of. I'd left feeling accomplished, proud even. My work was solid. My supervisor backed it. Everything was fine. The small camera mounted in the corner of the conference room had recorded every word, every reassurance, every approval. Standard procedure. Easy to forget. Impossible to deny. By lunch, people avoided my eyes. One coworker whispered, "That was rough." Another asked if I was okay. I wasn't. But I was quiet. The morning meeting had ended around 11, and by noon, everyone knew what had happened. Office gossip moved faster than email. People I'd worked with for years suddenly found reasons to avoid the break room when I was there. Others offered those sad, sympathetic smiles that made everything worse. Tasha cornered me by the coffee machine. "That was completely unfair," she said in a low voice, glancing around to make sure nobody heard. "Everyone knows you don't make mistakes like that." "Thanks," I managed, stirring sugar into coffee I didn't want. "Derek's been under pressure," she continued, like she was trying to make sense of it. "The executives have been breathing down his neck about performance metrics." I appreciated that she was trying to help, but excuses didn't change what happened. Nothing changed the fact that Derek had looked at 20 people and lied. Nothing changed how small I'd felt, sitting there while he rewrote history. "I'm fine," I told Tasha, even though we both knew it was a lie. I took my coffee back to my desk and stared at my computer screen without seeing it. Fine was the last thing I was. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry in the bathroom. I opened my calendar and started planning. Confronting Derek would be pointless. He'd already committed to his version of events in front of witnesses. He'd double down, get defensive, maybe even make things worse for me. Crying would just confirm whatever narrative he was building about me being unprofessional or emotional. Instead, I did what I always did. Got organized. I opened a new folder on my desktop, labeled it Documentation, and started listing everything I remembered about the approval process. Dates, times, people present, exact words Derek had used. My memory was good, trained by years of taking detailed notes in meetings. But memory wasn't enough. I needed evidence. Hard proof that couldn't be explained away or dismissed. I pulled up our company's meeting recording system, a clunky internal platform that automatically archived every conference room session. The search function was terrible, requiring specific date ranges and room numbers. I started with 3 weeks ago, typing in the conference room where Derek had approved my work. The system churned slowly, loading files that could take minutes to open. While I waited, I opened my email and started searching for any written communication about the project. Anything with Derek's approval or instructions. Anything that supported my version of what happened. I replayed the meeting alone in my car. His voice filled the silence. Mallory, version B is the right call. I'll own it. I sat there until my hands stopped shaking. Finding the recording had taken 3 hours of searching through the company's terrible archive system. But there it was, dated 3 weeks back, conference room 4B. I downloaded it to a personal drive, making sure I had backup copies. Listening to it in my car during lunch the next day, parked in the far corner of the parking garage where nobody would see me, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that I had proof. Anger all over again at how easily Derek had lied. Vindication that I wasn't crazy or misremembering. The audio quality was decent. You could hear everything clearly. Derek's voice, confident and reassuring. Go with version B. If anyone questions it, I'll handle it. This is my call, not yours. Luis agreeing. Me explaining the risks one more time. Derek cutting me off. The executive team wants to see confidence. This shows confidence. Then his electronic signature approving everything. 17 minutes of evidence that completely contradicted everything he'd said in that morning meeting. I played it 3 times, making sure I hadn't missed anything. Each time, Derek's promises sounded clearer. Each time, his betrayal felt sharper. That afternoon he stopped by my desk. Don't take it personally, he said softly. That's when I knew this wasn't panic. It was strategy. Derek leaned against my cubicle wall, arms crossed, wearing the same expression he used when coaching junior staff. Concerned. Paternal. Completely fake. These things happen in business, he continued, keeping his voice low enough that nearby co-workers couldn't hear. Sometimes we have to make tough calls about accountability. I looked up at him, keeping my face neutral. I followed your instructions exactly. I understand you feel that way, he said, using that therapist tone that made me want to throw my stapler at his head. But perception matters in leadership. The executive team needed to see decisive action. Decisive action. That's what he was calling it. Throwing me under the bus was decisive action. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from saying something I'd regret. Derek patted my desk like I was a dog who'd just learned to sit. You're a good analyst, Mallory. This is just a learning experience. Keep your head down, do solid work, and this will blow over. He walked away before I could respond. That's when I understood. This wasn't Derek panicking and making a desperate mistake. This was calculated. He'd decided I was expendable and he'd acted on it. The recording in my car suddenly felt less like insurance and more like a weapon. Saved emails, screenshots, timestamps. Every smile he used like a shield, I cataloged it. Organization had always been my strength, and now it became my armor. I created a detailed timeline of the entire project, from initial assignment to Derek's public betrayal. Every email where he'd given instructions. Every instant message where he'd approved my approach. Every meeting note where his decisions were documented. I took screenshots of everything, saving them with clear file names and dates. Derek's approval signature on the final forecast. His email saying, "This looks excellent, send it up the chain." The automated notification showing he'd forwarded my work to the executive team without changes. I also started noticing patterns I'd overlooked before. How Derek's praise was always private but his criticism was public. How he positioned himself in meetings to take credit for successful projects but used phrases like, "the team," when things went wrong. How he'd built his reputation by being careful about blame distribution. Other people's successes became his achievements. Potential failures became their learning opportunities. I'd been watching it happen for years without recognizing the pattern. Because I'd trusted him. Because I believed loyalty went both ways. I wouldn't make that mistake again. Everything went into my documentation folder. Evidence building like a dam holding back a flood. I didn't rush HR. I waited until the rumor reached them first. Human resources didn't just handle complaints. They monitored workplace dynamics, tracked team morale, investigated whispers before they became problems. In a company of 300 people, gossip about public blame in an executive meeting would absolutely reach them. I knew this because I'd watched it happen before. So I waited. I did my work. I showed up on time. I participated in meetings with appropriate professionalism. I didn't badmouth Derek or complain to coworkers. I just let the situation sit there, obvious and uncomfortable, while other people talked. Tasha definitely talked. So did Luis, who'd been in the original approval meeting and looked confused by Derek's sudden memory change. Others who'd witnessed the morning meeting shared their discomfort with friends across departments. Within 4 days, 3 different people from HR had casually stopped by my desk for check-ins. How was I doing? How was the team dynamic? Any concerns about my current projects? I kept my answers brief and professional. Fine. Normal. Just focused on my work. They'd get there eventually. I just had to be patient. Meanwhile, my documentation folder grew. Every interaction with Derek. Every email. Every moment that might matter. When HR finally asked the right questions, I'd be ready with answers. He rated me needs improvement. My hands stayed folded. Inside something hardened. The performance review came 2 weeks after the meeting. Standard quarterly assessment, scheduled months in advance. Derek had never given me anything below, exceeds expectations, in 6 years. This time he marked me as needs improvement in 3 categories. Decision-making, accountability, and attention to detail. The irony was almost funny. He'd written comments that made my blood pressure spike. Mallory would benefit from more conservative approaches to forecasting. Recent overconfidence in projections suggests need for additional oversight and training. Overconfidence. He'd ordered me to use the aggressive forecast. He'd approved every number. He'd signed off on everything. And now he was documenting it as my failure. We sat across from each other in his office for the review discussion. Derek slid the paper across his desk, that fake concerned expression firmly in place. I know this is disappointing, he said. But I have to be honest about areas needing growth. I read through every word, my hands perfectly still, my face showing nothing. Inside, something that had been soft and trusting turned cold and hard as concrete. I understand, I said calmly. Is there anything else? Derek looked almost disappointed by my reaction. Maybe he wanted tears or anger. Something he could use to justify his assessment. Gave him nothing. Just collected my copy of the review, thanked him for his time and walked out. Back at my desk, I scanned the review and added it to my documentation folder. Evidence. Timeline. Pattern of behavior. He started slipping. Interrupting. Correcting himself mid-sentence. He thought he'd won. That's when people always make mistakes. Over the next week, Derek's behavior shifted in small but noticeable ways. He interrupted me more in meetings, talking over my input like my opinions didn't matter. He second-guessed my work in front of others, asking questions designed to make me look unprepared. He volunteered me for grunt work, the boring tasks nobody wanted, while giving high-visibility projects to other team members. But he was also getting sloppy, overconfident. In one meeting, he referenced the forecast that I developed before catching himself and adding with team input. In another, he claimed credit for a client solution I'd created, then got confused when someone asked about implementation details. His stories about the quarterly forecast started changing slightly. First it was my oversight. Then it became a collaborative decision with unclear ownership. Then he suggested maybe the executive team had misunderstood the projections. He was forgetting what lies he'd told to whom. Classic mistake. When you're telling the truth, the story stays consistent. When you're lying, you have to remember which version you told each person. Derek was juggling too many versions. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet, consistent, professional. I did excellent work. I didn't complain. I documented everything. And I waited for him to make the mistake that would crack his facade open. HR emailed me. Can you provide context around the decision? I smiled for the first time in weeks. The email came from Nina Pacheco, Senior HR Business Partner. Subject line: follow-up discussion regarding Q2 forecast project. Short, professional, carefully neutral. It asked if I could provide background information about the decision-making process for the quarterly forecast. They wanted to understand the timeline, who was involved, what approvals were given. They were asking questions Derek should have wanted them to avoid. I read the email 3 times, making sure I understood exactly what they were asking for. This wasn't a witch hunt. HR was doing due diligence, trying to piece together what actually happened. They'd heard rumors. They'd noticed the tension. They'd seen Derek's performance review of me. Now they were fact-finding. I hit reply and typed a brief, factual response. I explained the project timeline, the 2 forecasting approaches I'd developed, Derek's decision to go with the more aggressive version, his promise to take responsibility. I kept it simple, unemotional, just facts and dates. Then I mentioned, almost casually, that our approval meeting had been in conference room 4B, the one with automatic recording. Would they like me to provide the meeting file for reference? I attached nothing yet, just offered. Let them ask for it. Let them request the evidence officially. Make it their investigation, not my vendetta. I hit send and leaned back in my chair, smiling at my screen. Finally, someone was asking the right questions. I attached the recording. No commentary. No accusations. Just truth. Nina's response came within 2 hours. Yes, please provide any relevant meeting recordings or documentation that might help us understand the project timeline and approval process. I'd been waiting for that email. Everything was ready. I opened my documentation folder and created a clean, organized package. The meeting recording from 3 weeks ago, clearly labeled with date and room number. Screenshots of Derek's email approval. The instant message where he'd said, "This looks excellent, send it up the chain." The performance review where he'd blamed me for overconfident projections. Timeline document showing the sequence of events. I didn't write a long explanation. I didn't add emotional commentary about betrayal or unfairness. I just wrote, "Per your request, attached is the approval meeting recording and related project documentation. The discussion regarding forecast methodology begins at timestamp 422. Derek's approval and statement of responsibility occurs at timestamp 1115. Please let me know if you need any clarification." Professional. Factual. Devastating. I attached the files, double-checked that everything opened correctly, and hit send. Then I closed my laptop and went to lunch. There was nothing left to do now but wait. The evidence spoke for itself. Derek's voice, recorded and time-stamped, promising to take responsibility, approving every decision, claiming ownership, all contradicting everything he'd said in that morning meeting 3 weeks later. Truth didn't need my commentary, just needed to be heard. 2 days passed, then 3. He stopped making eye contact. HR investigations move slowly. They have to interview people, review documentation, consult with legal, build a complete picture before taking action. I knew this, but waiting was still hard. On day 2, I noticed Nina talking to Luis in the hallway. Their conversation looked serious. Luis kept shaking his head, gesturing with his hands the way he did when explaining something important. On day 3, I saw Derek leave Nina's office looking pale. His usual confident stride had turned into something smaller, more careful. He didn't look at me as he passed my desk. Actually, he started avoiding me entirely. In meetings, he suddenly found reasons to focus on other team members. When I asked questions, he gave short answers and moved on quickly. The casual stops by my desk disappeared. His interruptions stopped. It was like I'd become invisible, except I knew the truth. I wasn't invisible. I was dangerous. Because once HR hears that recording, once they compare Derek's promises to his public blame, there's no spin that makes him look good. No explanation that saves him. He knew it too. I could see it in how his shoulders hunched slightly when walking through the office. How his laugh sounded forced in team meetings. How he checked his phone constantly, probably waiting for the next email from HR. The power dynamic had shifted and we both felt it. HR asked for another meeting, this time without him present. My pulse thudded. Something bigger was happening. Nina's email came on Thursday morning. Can you meet this afternoon at 2? Conference room 6A. Just you. No Derek. No team members. Just me and HR. That meant they'd moved past fact-finding. They had conclusions, questions, maybe decisions. I showed up 5 minutes early, carrying a notebook out of habit even though I probably wouldn't need it. Nina was there with another HR representative I'd seen but never worked with directly. Theo Blanchard, employee relations specialist. They weren't smiling, but they didn't look hostile either. Professional. Serious. Thanks for meeting with us, Mallory. Nina began. We've been reviewing the documentation you provided, along with other information gathered during our investigation. I nodded, keeping my hands still. We have some follow-up questions, Theo added. But first, we want to make sure you feel comfortable speaking openly. This conversation is confidential. They asked about my 6 years at the company, my relationship with Derek, whether I'd experienced situations like this before, how I felt about the performance review. Their questions were careful, strategic, designed to uncover patterns. And as they asked, I realized something. This wasn't just about one meeting anymore. This wasn't just about the quarterly forecast. They were investigating Derek, his management style, his pattern of blame distribution, his treatment of team members. I wasn't alone. They asked gently, has this happened before? I realized I wasn't alone. Neither had they. Nina leaned forward slightly. We've spoken to several other team members. Some have shared concerns about unclear accountability and inconsistent feedback. He paused. We're trying to understand if this is an isolated incident or part of a broader pattern. I thought about the past 6 years. Moments I'd dismissed or rationalized. Times when Derek had subtly shifted blame to protect himself. Projects where credit disappeared when success turned uncertain. Nothing this direct, I said carefully. But looking back, there were smaller moments. Times when Derek's version of events didn't quite match what I remembered. I always figured I'd misunderstood or forgotten details. Can you give us examples? Theo asked, pen ready. I described a client project 2 years ago where my solution saved a failing relationship. Derek had presented it as his idea. When the client praised his creativity, he'd thanked them without mentioning me. Another time, a budget analysis I'd done was used in a presentation to executives. Derek presented it without attribution. When someone questioned a number, he'd looked at me and said, Mallory put these together, so we should verify. Implying potential errors were mine while success was his. The more I talked, the more examples surfaced. Small moments that seemed insignificant alone but together formed a clear pattern. Nina and Theo took notes, asking follow-up questions, clearly matching my experiences against information from others. I wasn't the first person to sit in this chair describing Derek's behavior. I wouldn't be the last. I wasn't in the room when they played the recording for him, but I heard he went pale halfway through. The second meeting with Derek happened Friday afternoon. I only knew about it because Tasha saw him walking toward the HR wing looking like he might throw up. Luis later told me that Derek had asked him whether he remembered the approval meeting. Every word, Luis had apparently said. You told Mallory to go aggressive and promised you'd handle any questions. By Monday, the office atmosphere had changed. Derek was there but different, quieter. His usual confident presence had dimmed. He held his morning team meeting but seemed distracted, losing his train of thought mid-sentence. I later heard from someone who knew someone in HR that Derek had tried to explain the recording. He'd claimed he'd been under pressure, that his words had been taken out of context, that the quarterly forecast issue was more complex than a single meeting could show. But recordings don't lie. Context doesn't change clear statements. This is my call, not yours. I'll handle it. I'll take responsibility. Those words, in his own voice, undermined every excuse. When HR compared that recording to his performance review of me, to his public blame in the morning meeting, to the pattern described by multiple employees, the picture was clear. Derek Lawson wasn't a leader making tough calls. He was someone who'd built a career on taking credit and distributing blame, and he'd finally gotten caught. His authority vanished overnight. Meetings reassigned. Access revoked. No announcement. Just absence. The changes happened quietly but obviously. Monday afternoon our team meeting invite was updated. Led by interim supervisor, Nina Pacheco. Derek's name removed. Projects he'd been overseeing were redistributed to other managers. His direct reports suddenly had new approval chains that bypassed him entirely. By Tuesday his office was empty. Not cleaned out, just empty. Like he'd stopped coming in. His computer login was deactivated. His email bounced back with "user not found." No company-wide announcement explained the change. No official statement about investigation or disciplinary action. Just sudden, complete absence. Corporate disappearance. People noticed, obviously. Rumors spread fast. Some heard about an HR investigation. Others claimed he'd been put on administrative leave. A few suggested he'd resigned voluntarily. Nobody knew for certain, which made the speculation worse. I stayed quiet. Worked on my projects. Answered questions about the quarterly forecast when the new interim supervisor asked. I didn't gossip or celebrate. I didn't need to. Everyone could see what happened. 1 week Derek had been running the team with absolute authority. The next week he might as well have never existed. Authority built on lies doesn't just crack. Shatters completely. And once it's gone, there's no rebuilding it. Not at this company. Not with these people. Not after that recording. Char apologized to me. They offered a role on a different team. More pay. More visibility. Nina scheduled a private meeting in her office. Not a conference room. More personal. Less formal. Mallory, we want to apologize, she began. The situation you experienced was unacceptable. Your supervisor violated company policy regarding performance accountability and created a hostile work environment. Hearing those words, official and serious, made something in my chest loosen. Validation. We've taken corrective action regarding Derek Lawson, she continued. And we're implementing additional oversight measures for team leadership. Then she slid a folder across her desk. We'd also like to discuss your future here. Your work has been consistently excellent. Multiple people, including executives who saw your quarterly forecast, have praised your analytical skills. Inside the folder was a job description. Senior Financial Analyst, Strategic Planning Division. Direct report to the VP of Finance. 30% salary increase. Annual bonus structure. Clear advancement path. This team needs someone with your skills and integrity, Nina said. We'd like you to consider this position. It's a lateral move technically, but it positions you for future management opportunities. I read through the offer carefully. Better pay. Better team. Better leadership. Most importantly, completely away from Derek's influence or reputation. I'd like 24 hours to review this, I said. Nina smiled. Of course. Take your time. But I already knew my answer. He resigned quietly. No goodbye email. No defense left. Derek's official resignation came through the company notification system Wednesday morning. Brief, corporate, void of personality. Derek Lawson has decided to pursue other opportunities effective immediately. We wish him well in his future endeavors. That was it. No farewell lunch. No thank you speech. No final team meeting where he'd pass the torch with gracious words about growth and change. He just disappeared from the employee directory like he'd been deleted. I heard through the grapevine that HR had given him a choice. Resign with a neutral reference, or face termination with cause and potential legal action for misconduct. He'd chosen resignation, self-preservation until the very end. Some people felt bad for him. Everyone makes mistakes, one coworker said. Seems harsh. But most people, especially those who'd worked closely with Derek, weren't surprised. Too many of us had stories now. Small moments of stolen credit or shifted blame that individually seemed minor but collectively revealed character. Tasha stopped by my desk with coffee. Justice, she said simply. Luis sent me a message. Truth wins eventually. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel triumphant or victorious. I just felt tired and relieved. The weight I'd been carrying since that morning meeting, the constant tension of knowing the truth while everyone believed lies, finally lifted. Derek was gone. The truth had been heard. And I could finally breathe normally again. 3 months later, my work led a department-wide rollout. People listened when I spoke now. The strategic planning division moved faster than my old team. Projects were collaborative instead of competitive. Leadership was transparent instead of territorial. My new supervisor, Patricia Diaz, believed in developing people rather than protecting herself. She gave credit generously and took responsibility naturally. Everything Derek should have been but never was. My first major project was implementing a new forecasting methodology across all divisions. The same aggressive but data-driven approach I'd used in that quarterly forecast. The one Derek had approved then blamed me for. This time I presented it directly to executives, explained my reasoning, showed the supporting data, defended my methodology when questioned. And when someone asked about risk, I answered honestly. There's always risk with forward projections. But these numbers are based on solid market analysis, and I stand behind them. The executives approved it, praised my thorough work, asked me to lead the company-wide implementation. Patricia, sitting beside me in the meeting, smiled. Excellent presentation, Mallory. Those words, from a leader who meant them, felt different than Derek's empty praise ever had. My work was now visible across the company. People from other divisions reached out for advice. My name appeared in project updates and strategy documents. I was invited to planning meetings I'd never had access to before. Not because I'd destroyed Derek, but because my work was finally being seen on its own merit. I never contacted him. I didn't need to. Because the most powerful revenge isn't being loud. It's being right, patient, and impossible to erase. Derek sent me one email after his resignation. Subject line: following up. It sat in my inbox for 2 days before I opened it. Mallory, I know things ended badly between us. I hope you understand the pressure I was under. Maybe we could talk sometime about what happened. I read it once, felt nothing, and deleted it. There was nothing to discuss. No conversation that would change what he'd done or who he'd revealed himself to be. Some people thought I should respond. Give him closure, one friend suggested. But closure wasn't mine to give. Derek's career problems were consequences of his own choices. His reputation damage came from his own actions, recorded and undeniable. I'd simply refused to accept blame for his decisions. 6 months after everything, I was thriving. New position, new projects, new respect. Meanwhile, I heard Derek was working at a smaller firm, entry-level position, rebuilding a reputation he'd destroyed himself. Sometimes people ask me what happened, how I'd survived that situation. I always gave the same answer. Document everything. Stay professional. Let the truth speak for itself. Because the most powerful revenge isn't being loud or dramatic. It's being competent, patient, and impossible to dismiss. It's knowing your worth and refusing to accept anyone's attempt to diminish it. It's keeping receipts. And sometimes when liars get comfortable, it's simply pressing play.